Hi, everybody. I am very excited to be here today because I am extremely passionate about the topic of communication, and I've been part of this church since I was a very little girl. I've been here since I was maybe 6 years old, um, and I have grown in this church. I have grown with most of your children, probably taught them in Sunday school at one point or another, and it's something that I do for a living too. So I'm a school psychologist, and I work at a preschool and a middle school. And over the last couple of years, I've worked at elementary through high school. So I've talked to all of your kids in Sunday school. I have talked to many kids out in the public on a daily basis. So I hear their perspective, and now that I'm a parent, I get to live the other side of the perspective. So I'm really excited just to share with you things that I have learned, I have read about, and just to help break some of the barriers that we experience. So we're going to talk about a number of different things, and we're going to watch a really funny video that I think you guys are really going to appreciate, and we'll talk about communication from many different perspectives. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just kind of give an overview. We'll talk about some of the cultural differences between how Egyptian people or Egyptian parents coming from Egypt might be used to communicating with their children, and then we'll talk about different parenting styles, and then we'll talk about the biblical approach to parenting and to communicating with your kid and being a smarty parent. And I'll explain later what that is and what that means. But I'm excited for a number of different reasons. One of the things that really hit me in the beginning when Key told me about this whole series and the pep talk mission in general was to bring information to parents, especially parents of middle and high school, about different topics that all their kids are facing. So when he initially told me that one of the topics would be communication, I said, that's the one I want. Because oftentimes we always think this, okay? This is one of the books that I read to get ready for this talk. It says, have a new teenager by Friday, right? Oh, that's like a miracle, right? We all have, look, I just want to get a show of hands. How many of you guys have children, and you might fall in multiple stages, but how many of you have children under 5 years old? Okay, how many of you have children in elementary? Okay, middle school, high school? You guys have a lot of children. And then over high school, college age. Okay, so basically high school and below, which is perfect. So a lot of times when we have kids and they're so cute and they're so little and they're little strollers and then they become toddlers, they all kind of seem the same. A lot of them are compliant and they listen, and we meet their daily demands. We change them, we feed them, we play with them, and they all kind of are the same. And then as they grow up, you start to see differences between them. You start to see late elementary, middle school, they start to have their own personalities. They start to maybe rebel a little bit. And then that's when we all start to worry and think, I don't know what to do with this preteen, or I don't know what to do with this teenager, and this is not the kid that I've known. But in reality, after reading this book that says how to have a new teenager by Friday, it's a hoax. That's not what it is. It's basically not telling you how to change your child. It's telling you how to change you as a parent and your approach to your child in order to eventually get a different child. But that's exactly it. And that's why I'm really proud of this group, and I'm really proud of this service, because this is a group of parents who want to get together and figure out what we can do as parents in order to approach our children growing up in this day and age differently, as opposed to looking at it as the child's problem. My kid won't listen and my kid needs to change. We're going to change that approach to look at ourselves and to see how we can truly have new elementary, middle, high schoolers by Friday, meaning, well, today is Friday, but meaning how to change ourselves to get a different approach from them. Something that I have learned in my very few years of being a parent, I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old, so don't have so much personal experience raising older kids, but I do see them at work. But in my little experience of being a parent of a 3-year-old, I can already tell you that everything that you model in your home, the communication that you model with your spouse, and I'll say probably most of you are all moms here except for 2 dads, but the communication that you experience on a daily basis with your spouse, with your husband, is exactly what your kids are looking at and what they're going to model themselves after. So what we want to do today is we want to look at how to communicate. But the problem is I can't just throw out a bunch of strategies at you, right? I can't just say, hey, try this really cool idea, try this strategy, make sure to do this in your home. Because if you don't have an overarching philosophy as a parent, it's going to be really hard to live out those strategies on a daily basis. Because communication with your kids and having really good, effective communication is not about, a really good talk that you have with them, or a strategy that you use here or there. It's not about that. It's really about how your home is structured and how you look at them as parents, how you look at your children. So for example, one of the strategies, and we'll just skip ahead so I can show you how important it is to have kind of an overarching philosophy of parenthood. So one of the strategies in effectively communicating with your child is you should not use the word should, right? Oh, Habibi, you should have finished your homework by now. You should have been in bed by now. Well, you should have finished all of the basilla on your plate. Should. But experts always say that it's not a good idea to use should. So if I just give you this strategy and you take it and you say, okay, good, I'm not going to use that word anymore. You're going to go and then you're going to get really frustrated at dinner time and say, you should. Wait, I'm not supposed to say that. But you have no idea why, right? So before we talk about strategies, which we will in the second part of the talk tonight, it's broken up into 2 parts. Before we talk about all those specific strategies that are really going to be helpful in you working with your kids, we have to back up just 1 second and talk about what is our philosophy of parenting. What's our whole idea as parents? And I think there's general things that all of us can agree on. We're all Christian parents. We all really want to do a couple core things. One of them is to pass on our faith from our generation, from the parents to our children. I think we can all agree that that is extremely important. Doesn't matter if we're from Egypt, if we're from here, if we're from China or Antarctica. If we are Christians, we want to pass on our core values and what we believe to our children. Another thing I think we can all agree on is that we want to live lives and teach them to live lives that follow Christ. That's something that every day, in and out, you see your child stealing from the store or, taking a toy that doesn't belong to them. You go and talk to them and you intervene because you want them to live out the commandments in their life. And the other thing is we need to be able to rely on God's word as the authority. So there's so many different parenting approaches and different things that we can try. But I think that no matter what our differences are, we can all agree that these are the core things. But now we need to start to figure out how do we weed out what is cultural and what's tradition and what did we bring maybe from our mother country and what are just popular parenting techniques, and then what's really biblical and Christ-centered, and what does the Bible say about how to raise our children. And we know the Bible is full of it, but sometimes what I think Pep Talks is also trying to do is merge the two, is weave together God's word and practical application of it. And so that's what we're going to do tonight, is we're going to look at God's word and what does he say a parent should be and how to raise your child in this biblical way, so that we have this overarching philosophy, and then we pull strategies and we pull advice for giving to our kids and all of that from there. So just to kind of break the ice for a second, we found this video that is in Arabic, and it's an Egyptian comedian, and he is talking about the different types of tunts that are out there, okay? So it's very self-explanatory. You'll watch it, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have.
Different types of what?
Tunt.
Tons.
Yeah, like Uncle Tunt. Different types of tunts. Okay, so enjoy it. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that because every time I watch that, I seriously die of laughter. Um, I was born and raised here, but I go to Egypt every summer ever since I was born with my family, and this just reminds me of every single tongue I know, right? You have to have related to at least at one of those, and you probably know many people who fit each of those categories. So, anyways, I show that not only to make us laugh a little, but to show us that there are so many ways of communicating, and many of these are what we are doing to our children on a daily basis, which are not healthy means of communication. Extremely funny, but not necessarily what a child growing up here in the United States is going to be able to respond to or respond well to. All right. Generally, this is very typical in Egypt, right? The tant that needs to ask you a million questions. The tant that feels like it's her business to be in your business. The tant that asks you about every detail in your life or needs to put you down as soon as she sees you in order to tell you that she misses you. Like, you never call me, oh, you must be zalana minni, you must whatever. And me growing up here, I never understood that. I would get so upset and say, no, that's not true. And my sweet husband had to remind me that that's just their way of relating. So while we as an older generation that's grown up here have started to realize that when your kids are middle school, high school, you start to talk to them that way and they're going to shut you out. Some of the things that I experienced growing up, thank you. Some of the things that I experienced growing up with in this kind of community, right, with parents who had just come from Egypt and surrounded by lots of people who had just come from Egypt and bringing their ways of communication over here were different. So in Egypt, because of the culture and because of the history, we, and especially us as Christians, we're taught to be hush-hush. We're taught not to talk about certain things. Certain topics are aib or, off the table. You're not supposed to discuss these things because that's not what we do. But I will tell you that the world is discussing these issues, the issues of sexuality, the issues of everything. The way your kids talk, behave. I mean, everything is being covered in schools by kids talking to one another. So I will tell you this, that if you don't talk to your kids about things, the world is going to. Their friends are, people who are their peers in school are going to talk to them and infiltrate their mind. So even though we might come from a background that tells us that we shouldn't discuss these things, or maybe just go discuss them secretly with your father of confession behind closed doors, which is good. But if we're not talking about them daily, like the Bible says, talk about these things, the biblical commands with your children when you wake up, when you eat, when you walk in the street. If we're not doing this with our children, talking, having an open dialogue daily, then they're going to hear a different version of it from the outside. Something that I always, that I wanted to bring up because I've experienced it, is oftentimes something would not be right, okay? Like, for example, I got engaged when I was 19 years old, and something that my mom told me in the beginning was, what am I going to tell people? You're so young. What am I supposed to tell people when they ask me, why did Susan get engaged so young? And so I had to understand that this is something that is very common in the Egyptian culture, is that we care very much about how things appear to the outside world, right? We don't want our kids to date or get a tattoo or do anything, right? Even if it might be okay for them. I'm not saying those things are, but I'm saying instead of judging what's right for our son or daughter, we think about how these things will look to the outside world. And while that has some truth and some credibility, I want to challenge us to think beyond that, to think beyond what it looks like from the outside. And if our cup looks perfectly white, like Jesus says in the New Testament, that the Pharisees, they look beautiful and sparkling from the outside, but it's like a whitewashed tomb from the inside, meaning that it's dirty and it has bones on the inside that are dying, meaning that we need to do two things. Number one, look at what's really best for our child. And number two, look at what's right in God's eyes. And and have those two questions be the driving force for what we allow for our children, what we encourage our children to do. So, for example, in my situation, is it right? Is it what's best for my daughter to get married at 21? Is it what's right in God's eyes for my daughter to get married when she's 21? If it's yes to both of those, then we proceed, and we don't care really what the outside world says. We say, that is what God has sanctioned. That's what God wants. Those are just some basic points just about some of the cultural differences. But when you start, catching yourself acting like one of these, take a step back, and then we're going to talk about some strategies to replace the way that we're used to talking with our children. So let's kind of give an overall picture as to different types of parents, okay? Because all of us are going to have a different style, but there's three just general types of different parenting styles that are out there. What type of parent we are drives how we communicate with our children, okay? So as I talk about each of these three styles, I want you to think about, do you fall under one of these categories? And maybe you don't fall under one of them specifically. Maybe you're 75% one and 25% another. But let's challenge ourselves to be honest with ourselves and think which type of parent we are. So the first type of parent is called whatever you want, dear parent. There we go. Whatever you want, dear type of parent. That's the type of parent that wants their kids to be happy. Now, none of these parenting styles sound bad. We're not talking about what's bad and what's good. We're just talking about ultimately what's going to be effective with your children. So this parent wants their kid to be happy. Now, I think all of us want our kids to be happy, but I think ultimately their happiness is not our ultimate goal. This parent works hard to be their kid's friend. This parent falls for, in English we call it the woe is me line. So for example, I'm a teenager, I am so tired because I've been up all night studying for my midterms, and so I have the sniffles and I feel kind of sick, so I tell my parent, I can't go to school this morning. I can't because I've been studying all night. And this parent will say, Ma'alish ya habibi, you've really worked so hard. Okay, stay and let me make you a kubayt shay and you can just relax and I'll take you straight to the test. You don't have to go your first 2 periods. This is the type of parent that wants to please their child because they don't want their child to go through any hard times. This is the parent that will bail their child out of situations because they want what's best for them. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a 3rd grade daughter, and she comes to you on a Wednesday night, and she says, Mom, please, I really need you to take me to the store. I really need to buy poster board and glue and construction paper because my project is due tomorrow. Oh, okay. She says, I need you to take me. So the mom says, okay, honey, no problem. When is your project due? It's due tomorrow, Mom. Okay, hon, how long have you had for this project? Well, you see, it was assigned 2 weeks ago, but the thing is that I had all my math homework, and then we had that party, and then we had that church. Oh, remember I had to go to church for competition? And they start using all these words, and it overwhelms the parent. And then the parent says, okay, honey, okay, yalla, get your jacket, let's go, because we have to quickly go get the supplies so you can finish before tomorrow. That is a whatever you want, dear, permissive parent. Permissive means that you allow your kid to get away with things that looks at the immediate. Yes, they'll be able to get their supplies, they'll be able to get their project done, maybe not so well, but they will for tomorrow. But it's not helping them in the long run. It's not helping them build responsibility. It's not helping them be able to plan in advance and suffer consequences for their actions. So oftentimes mothers fall under this category, and it's not always, but oftentimes mothers do, because we love our children and we want to do what's best for them and we don't want them to fail. So we protect and we coddle them and we make sure everything is perfect. If they don't have clean clothes, we wash them, we stay up late, cooking food, making lunches. And that's good, it's noble, we should do that as parents. But at the same time, we have to watch out not to enable our children so that as they grow up, they don't know how to do anything and they think that the world should be handed to them like their mother has handed it to them. Oftentimes, people who grow up to be permissive parents are parents who, when they were younger, were part of a large family, sometimes middle children, sometimes in between different brothers and sisters who are arguing with each other, maybe parents who are arguing with sisters or brothers, and so they're stuck in the middle and they just want to do anything to appease them or anything to make, to calm down both sides and say, no, let's make a peaceful resolution, nobody be angry. A lot of times middle children fall under that role. So this is a dangerous type of parent to fall under. The next type of parent is called the my way or the highway type of parent. Some mothers fall under this, but oftentimes fathers do. Especially what I've seen, Egyptian fathers oftentimes fall under the my way or the highway. And that's also called an authoritarian parent. This type of parent will say, this is how it is. In our house, we are home by 8 o'clock. In this house, we do not wear this kind of clothing. While in reality, that's probably a good rule to have, that you don't wear, let's say, revealing clothing, or that you be home by a certain hour. Those are good things to have established in your home. But to present it in that way works when your kid is younger. It works when your kid is a toddler, and we tell our little son, Adrian, you are not to go out of this gate. It works. And it works for so long. Until your kid is middle school, sometimes early high school, sometimes late elementary, and they start to develop their own opinions. They start to see other kids and how they react to their parents and how they react to their teachers, and they don't accept it anymore, and that's when they rebel. And oftentimes the parents who thought they had angelic children are now coming to Abuna, coming to these meetings saying, something happened to my kid. My kid just flipped. All of a sudden they just changed. No, they didn't change all of a sudden. It's something that you've been doing from the very beginning that all of a sudden now isn't working because they're growing up. And you want them to have a mind of their own. But now there's friction. These are the type of parents who don't allow their kids really to have their own opinion unless it matches what their opinion is. These parents often develop this way because they grew up in a house where their parent was that way. So let's say their father or their mother was very authoritarian. It's either my way or the highway. You like it, you don't. You're in this house or you leave. And so they don't have any control when they're younger. So when they grow up and they become parents, whether they know it or not, and most of the times we don't know that we're doing these things, they develop this personality of an authoritarian because they come from very strict traditional homes where they had no control. And all of a sudden now they have the ability to be able to control the situation. But I will tell you very honestly from all the kids that I've talked to that have parents that that act in this way, that it breeds rebellion in the children. When you have put rules and you have no relationship with your child, it's simply rules, it breeds rebellion, meaning they become, They have attitudes, they don't listen, they don't want to follow what you have to say. They'll do the exact opposite, even if it's something they believe in. Let's say you say, you have to come Sunday, you have to come to church every Sunday. You have to dress as deacon. While maybe they enjoyed it growing up, but now because you're saying it in that way, they're going to go the exact opposite. So where does that leave us? What's the third type of parent? The third type of parent is the equal but different roles parent. It's very, it sounds similar, but it's very different. It's called an authoritative parent. This type of parent is a parent. The roles between parent and child are very distinct. You're not your child's friend, and you're not their drill sergeant. You are their parent, and you make sure that your role is a parent, and your child is a kid, meaning that they're going to follow what you say. However, the difference is that you respect your kid's opinion, even if it's different, especially if it's different than your own. You listen to them. You hold them accountable for themselves. You discuss issues. So when they say, I don't want to go to church on Sunday, it's boring anyways, I don't want to wake up. I wake up every single day for school, and now I just want one day to sleep in. Your approach is going to be different. Your approach is going to be, tell me more about that. And you're going to expand on that. And we're going to give, I don't want to give away all the secrets. No, just kidding. But we're going to talk exactly about those examples and what to do. I just don't want to steal from the second portion of it. But it's the approach that's different. Your emotions are even keel, meaning you're not going to yell, and you're not going to withdraw, and you're not just going to say, okay, Tayyib, sleep in. You're going to talk to them about it. You're going to listen to what they have to say, and you're going to validate that. Yeah, you know what? It is really hard to get up. It's hard for me to get up too in the morning. Sometimes I get so tired. And then that invites more conversation, and you talk about it. And then at the end, you're going to come to the conclusion of, yeah, we're going to get up and go to church. But it's the way you go about it. Now, something that I just wanted to mention, because in this type of parenting, the roles are very clear. You're the parent, this is the child. So at the end of the day, if your 11-year-old tells you, I don't want to go to church and all that, at the end of the day, you're going to go to church early. If that's the thing that you guys have been talking about, I don't want to say arguing about, but what you've been talking about, what you want is going to go. But your child needs to be able to feel like they can express what they're going through, what their frustrations are. Between 1 to 12 years old, you are that child's parent, and what you say goes. And then between 12, 13 to 16, your role changes. Your role changes from being a parent and telling them pretty much what to do, because we tell our kids what to do all the time, till it changes to becoming more of a coach. And you're coaching them, and a coach is not on the field during a game holding let's say it's a tennis match, the coach is not on the court holding the child's hand with the racket saying, okay, like this. No, that was done during practice. During the first 12 years of this kid's life, that's practice. 11, 12, 13 years old until 16, middle of high school, you're the coach. You're standing off of the court, you're on the sidelines, you're watching, you're instructing in between matches. Hey, don't forget, when you do your forehand, make sure to give it a top spin at the end. And then they go back into the game and they perfect it, and then they fail and they lose that game, and then you say, okay, that's okay, let's practice more of this, let's do this. And then you say 16, well, there's still kids at 16. But at 16, they should be able to play on their own. And yes, they still live in your home, but that's when 16, 17, that's the end of high school. By that point, you've taken a back seat, and you are now allowing them to make their own decisions, but you have seen them make decisions before, and you've been able to guide them through it. You've allowed them to fail. Like, for example, going back to that example of not putting your foot down. So this type of parent, authoritative parent, would say to their child, Wow, hon, I'm really sorry that your project is due tomorrow. I'm not going to be able to take you to the store to buy those supplies. But Mom, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to be able I'm going to get an F on this project. Yeah, I'm so sorry that you've done that to yourself. You're calm. You have not yelled. There's no yelling. It's a lot of times what I see happening in homes is a huge yelling match. You've let them suffer their own consequences, and she's in 3rd grade. So what? She fails a science project, a history project, a math final. It doesn't really matter at that point because you've taught her a lesson that she will carry her whole entire life. This kid will never forget materials for a project ever again. And if they do, they will suffer the consequences while they're in your home, under your roof, and when the stakes are not high. Because when it's high school and you need to pass an English class in order to get your diploma and get out of high school, those stakes are much higher. And if you haven't let your kid fail before then, that's a hard time to let them fail because then it has real consequences. So this is the type of parent that we're aiming for. This is the type of parent that we're going to go into further detail in terms of strategies to use to become this type of parent, an authoritative parent, where you love your kids and you love them enough to hold them accountable. You love them enough to say no sometimes, but you love them enough to hear what they have to say and to incorporate it in your discussions. So, Key, what's our timeline? Do we take a break now? Okay, we'll take a break and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how to be a smarty parent. Oops. Okay, we'll talk about how to be a smarty parent and all the strategies that we can implement in our homes. Okay, so now we get to the practical application of this. Okay. All right. So I've created a little acronym. An acronym is just a word that explains all of the different points that we're going to talk about. And it's a SMARTY. SMARTY is spelled S-M-A-R-T. Okay, so these are the strategies in which to have effective communication with your kids, especially teenagers, okay? Because I know that starts to get really challenging at that point, middle school, especially moving into high school, and especially boys who are not always willing to open up. So, effective communication, and these are in no order, so we'll just talk about each of them, and then we'll open it up to these questions that you have written down. So S. Your job as a parent is to have self-control and keep your temperament even, an even keel, okay? So your son comes up to you and he speaks disrespectfully to you. He yells at you, he might call you a word, he speaks down to you, says, "Mom, what do you do for this family? Anyways, you're so mean and I hate you." In your experience, when you were a kid, kids don't talk to their parents like that in Egypt, or else they would have diru alamin, right? But all of a sudden, your kid is talking to you this way. What do? Right? Oftentimes, we just want to yell back at them and say, "You can't talk to your mother that way. That's disrespectful." Right? But that doesn't get any results. You've now yelled at them. Maybe they'll say, "Sorry, Mom." Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll still say something and walk out of the room. The whole goal of communication is then to get closer to each other and have more of an understanding and to gain some knowledge of each other afterwards. That didn't happen after that encounter. So what do? You keep your cool and you stay very calm. And what you do is you give them a little nod and you walk out of the room. You didn't say anything. First of all, that's going to shock them because you've never just refrained from talking back with them. then it's going to give you two things. It's going to give you time to do two things. The first thing it's going to give you time to do is calm down, because of course you're angry. Your child knows how to push specific buttons within you that make you angry. So it's going to give you time to calm down. And number two, it's going to give you time to be able to think about the consequence that action deserves. So for example, your kid talks to you that way, you give him a little nod, and you walk out of the room. Later that night, maybe the next morning, your kid is acting strange. Your kid, first of all, doesn't understand why you haven't said anything to him. Then your kid comes up to you and says, Mom, if they're old enough, I need the keys to the car because I need to get to practice. Or, Mom, I need you to drive me to school or to my friend's house so I can work on a project. That's when you turn to him and you say, John, I did not like the way that you talked to me yesterday, and I will not give you a ride. And you leave it at that. You've done a couple of different things here. Number one, you have taken the time to be in control, self-control, calmly, so that you are teaching and modeling the behavior you want to see. So they came to you and they yelled at you. So if you yell back at them, you're teaching them that's the way we communicate. No, you want to show them that I want you, child, to speak to me calmly. So then you take the time to then calm yourself down so you can speak to them calmly. Number two, they didn't get away with what they did the day before. They're going to have a consequence for it. And the consequence is something that means something to them. So many times what we do right away is, give me your phone. You're not going to have your phone for 1 week. Turn off the internet. No, you can't do this or that. And we just want to take away everything from them. And if that's effective with that child, great. But if you're not seeing results and you take away their phone every week and they're okay with it, then you have achieved nothing. So it's going to come a time, and the time comes very quickly, where your kid needs something from you. They need money, they need a ride, they need you to bake them something for school, they need you to sign off on papers. I don't know, they need something from you eventually. You wait until that time, and then you calmly speak to them and you say, no, and you hold your ground. And let them suffer the consequences. If your kid comes home from school and they got in trouble because they hit someone at school, what do we do sometimes? I can't believe you. And what behavior are we modeling to them when we do the same behavior back to them? We hit them or we yell at them for doing that same thing to others. Now let me give you another example where if you feel comfortable enough, you can use humor in order to approach the situation. So some people are comfortable using humor, some people are not, but if we can bring more humor and laughter and joking into our homes, it works. So for example, your kid comes into the kitchen after school and says, I can't believe it. My English teacher hates me and I can't stand this. And Mom, you know what? You're always taking her side and I can't blah, blah, blah. And they're just like venting and angry. You can just, instead of yelling back or, engaging in an argument with them, you just stand back and say this. This is just like a funny way to do it. Good job. You should win an Oscar for your award-winning performance. And then you just walk out of the room. They're like, what? What did Mom just do? And then they come after you because they want a reaction from you. They want you to start getting angry. So we keep our control and we watch our body language. Number 2, M, we make sure to disciple and not just discipline. So discipline means, of course we need to discipline our kids, but there's a difference between discipling and disciplining. So, I'm going to give the translator a second to catch up. Discipline stops the behavior right now. You lied to me, so you're going to go to your room and you're going to lock the door and you're not going to come out all weekend. That stops the behavior. They got a consequence, and yeah, I punished my kid for doing something wrong. Yeah. Okay, now what? How are we changing this behavior? Discipling your kid means you still give them a consequence, but your focus is different. Your focus is on, how do I prepare my teen to make better choices in the future, to not lie in the future, because you don't care if they just lie once. If it was just once, we stop it, great. But we're afraid of patterns forming. We don't want them to keep lying. We don't want them to keep, yelling, stealing, not studying for an exam. So when you disciple your child, you're having a conversation with them. You're telling them, let's say they lied about an exam, they failed it, they hid their report card from you, and you want to approach them about it. You approach them again calmly, and you say, listen, I saw this report card stuffed in the trash, or I called your school and I got a copy of this report card. I'm aware that you hid this from me. Well, you know what, Mom, you say, listen, for the next, 2 days, you're going to, whatever this kid really likes to do, for the next 2 days, you're not going to be able to leave. I need you to work on extra chores in the home. That's your punishment or your consequence. And we're going to talk about it. Why did you feel the need to hide it from me? When they feel like you're not attacking them, they will be willing to talk more. A, always connect before you redirect. That's extremely, extremely important. Kids will only listen at all ages. They will only listen to us when they think that we care about them. If the only interaction that we have with them is redirection, meaning, you know what, go to your room, clean this, stop yelling at your brother, take out your homework, why did you get an F, go to sleep, all of this is just negative, right? I mean, and it's this stuff we have to say and we have to get through daily life, but at the same time, we're always redirecting their behavior. We're always talking to them about the things that they're not doing, what they should be doing, and we'll get to that example of should right now. But every time I talk to a teenager, what do I hear? My parents just don't understand me. So I ask them, why do you think they don't understand you? Because all they do is talk about what they think and they never hear me out. So your job as a parent is to listen to your teen. And they might be saying something that is either really ridiculous, doesn't make sense, is against your beliefs, is completely, something wrong, but at least you listen to them. Because let's say they cheated on their test in school, and then they got an automatic F because they cheated. Your goal is not to talk to your kid about, you cheated, I know you cheated, you should never do this again. That's not the goal. The goal is to talk to your kid about, why did you feel the need that you had to copy answers from another kid? And then you listen to the answer. But no, tell me. Well, I just didn't study because I have so much going on and I just needed to pass. And you have a conversation with them. Non-judgmental, open-ended conversation with your child about why, whatever happened. To go back to the example of should, how we tell our kids, you should have finished your homework by now, you should have gotten an A on this test, you should. Why is that not effective? Why? Because when you use the word should, it means that you didn't do something, but you should have done something else. So there is some kind of a lack that they have. And when we always talk about the lack that our kids have, doesn't study enough, you never take a shower and you smell, and you're not paying attention in Sunday school, and they're going to tune you out. Of course they're going to tune you out. Who would want to listen to someone who's always telling them every negative thing about them? Imagine if you were at work and your boss kept saying, you know what? You didn't organize these books correctly. You put them on the edge and they're supposed to be in the middle. And you're like, okay, sure, I did that, but what about all this other great work that I did all 8 hours? So that also goes to another point that we're going to talk about, but I'll just address it now, is that when we use the word should, it's focusing on the negative and it's perceived as a criticism. You're criticizing your kid. And while we think that that's effective, because I'm their parent, I have to teach them because they did this and it's my responsibility to teach them. Yes, of course it is your responsibility. But by pointing out only the negatives that they do and by not listening to their perspective, you're never going to be able to change them. Connecting with them means spending time with them, talking, doing things that they want to do. If your teenage son, when you pick him up from high school soccer practice, gets in the car, or your daughter, and you keep saying, oh, I think that's T. Let's just skip to T. T is talk and lecture less and listen more. So let's say you pick up your kid from soccer practice. We always ask, "How's your day?" Okay. Okay. How was your school? How was school? How was your practice? It was good. Okay. All right. Well, what about your friends? Are you guys, are you guys doing okay together? What are your friends like? How's it going? Whatever. You're just like, okay, I got nothing out of my child. So one of the examples in this book that I read, which was really good, is you say nothing. You just listen. And if they say nothing, then you just let it be very comfortable silence. Maybe uncomfortable silence. But you pick them up, and they're used to hearing the question of, how was your day? So you say nothing. Hey, how's it going? And you just keep driving. All of a sudden, they're astounded because you didn't ask them how their day was. Day after day, they might start to ask, well, what did you do today? Or, this thing happened at school today. And men especially, and teenage girls too, but especially boys and men, if you want to use it on your husbands as well, is they respond to side-by-side interaction as opposed to face-to-face. Meaning, if I want my teenage son to talk to me, I do something side-by-side with him. I go kart racing with him. I go take a hike in the, Topanga Canyon with him. I take him to Sky Zone, and I go, if I can't jump because my knees are bad, I go take him there, him and his friends. I go grab a burger with him at In-N-Out. I actually care about the video games he's playing, and I say, hey, teach me, or let me watch you beat this level. You do something side by side, and all of a sudden, you do the same thing with your husband, all of a sudden, talking happens. All of a sudden, you get something out of them. Because it's not going to happen on your terms. Face-to-face, the way women talk, they talk face-to-face, interaction. Tell me about your day. Oh, and maybe the girl talks so much with her mom. Or maybe with your friends, with your sister. It doesn't happen like that, especially with teenagers. You sit and look at them face-to-face, they're just going to give you a weird look and walk away. Under the T point, lecture less, talk less, listen more. Your kid is going to talk in extremes. As they become more of a teenager, they become more of an extremist. I hate this. I can't stand this. You always do that. You never do this. So-and-so's mom is so much cooler because she does this. And they say words that jab you and stab you, and they could say things like, I hate you, and I never want to talk to you again. And that hurts because you have been pouring your life into them for 12, 15 years. But you need to be the calm in your teenager's tornado, okay? If your kid mouths off to you, you be silent, and you model the behavior that you want to see. For example, they come home yelling. You give them some space. Later, instead of saying, why are you yelling? What is that all about? Another way you can approach it is just by saying, hey, you must have been really angry earlier. What's on your mind? You ask open-ended questions that get more of a response as opposed to just a question that's, how was your day? You can answer with, with a good or bad, fine. But you ask open-ended questions that force them to speak, especially when they're younger. You seemed really angry earlier. Tell me what that was all about. Something like that. R, respond, not react. This is my favorite one, okay, because we all do this all the time. I do this all the time with my husband. I have to catch myself. There's a huge difference between responding to our children or our spouses or our friends or anybody and reacting. Reacting is what we don't want. So this is an example. My 3-year-old says, Mommy, I want to get a pony. right? Or your 16-year-old says, you know what, I'm going to get a Corvette when I graduate high school. Yeah, and what do we say? We react. We say, you know what, first you have to get your grades up so you can get into a good college and get a good grades, and then you can get your Corvette. Bam, close the door of communication right there. Never going to talk to you again. Sorry. My 3-year-old, he tells me he wants to get a pony or a unicorn. He tells me I want to get it. Oh, honey, that doesn't exist. People can't really own ponies, You just kill your kid's dreams right there. Life will teach your kid that not everybody gets a pony and not everybody gets a Corvette. You don't have to be the one to say it and to close down the gates of communication. Your job is to respond. Really, which Corvette would you get? And if you don't know anything about cars, you could say, what color would you get? Would you get a red one or a yellow one, Oh, would you get the 6-cylinder VP, whatever? I don't know about cars either. Or would you get the S Sport one? Oh, you want a pony? Wow. Where would you ride this pony? Humor them. Your kid comes home and he says, what? We're eating malachaya again? I can't stand this green junk. I don't want this soupy stuff for dinner anymore. What do? We want to react. We say, you know what? I've been working all day and you're going to eat this malachaya and this is what I made for you for dinner. That's us, right? We're tired. We've had a long day, but we have to learn to respond to our kids. He's telling you something. He's telling you he's tired of this. So how do you respond? By being an authoritative parent. You say this. If you had your choice of any dinner in the whole world, what would you want to eat? First of all, they'll be shocked that you're asking them that, but he'll say, I don't know, like ribs. Ribs, okay. Go get a piece of paper and a pen and write down, okay, ribs. What else? What would you want next to it? Sushi maybe, and some like sashimi salad, maybe some mashed potatoes, and cheesecake for dessert. Okay, write it all down. And then you say, okay, I have it all down. You want to come with me to the market and get the ingredients so that next week we can have this for dinner? Yeah, sure, okay. They're going to eat their malachaya that night. Yeah, they're going to eat it because they were heard. It's not our job to react to everything. Your kid comes home with a piercing that you definitely do not approve of. They're too young, you don't even know how they got it. It is extremely easy to react. What do you think you're doing? We don't do this in this home. That's against the Bible. And they're like, where, Mom? And you don't even know where it's against the Bible. But God definitely doesn't want you to have that piercing, right? Our kids are going to do things. But if we react, we're going to lose them. At the end of the day, you're going to have that conversation with your kid. And the earlier you start having open dialogue with your children, the earlier these things will not be as much of an issue, or they'll be able to listen to you as they grow up. But if you're in the dead of it right now, your kid is 17 and they come home with something, what do? You could take time, tell them, you know what, I see that you've done this, let's talk about it tomorrow. It's not going to change overnight. You're just going to have time to maybe go to God in prayer and say, help me not kill my child, right? And then you'll talk to them about it tomorrow. Wow, I never expected to see that. Tell me, why did you do it? How did this happen? Conversation without judgment. And then you get to the point where, if they're young and you say, you know what, right now you have to take it out of your ear. When you're 18, you can make your decision if you want to put it back in. And E, encourage your child and put them up. There was a study that was done by USA Today, and it surveyed teenagers across the country as to what they desired most. And by far, there was an overwhelming percentage of teenagers who desired praise over money, over sex, over alcohol. And that is huge. If you can even imagine that these things that we think kids are dying to go for, that they desire praise way more than that. But the Bible teaches us that we need to do more than praise. We need to encourage over praise. Encourage is different because encouragement focuses on who the person is, and praise focuses on what the person does. So let's say my kid comes home and they found some money on the floor and they actually returned it. So I want to encourage them for doing the right thing. I won't say, I'm so proud of you because you turned in the money, because that's an action that they did. And that's a good thing that they did that action. But encouragement looks differently. Encouragement looks at who the person is, the character of the person that would return that money. Wow, I'm really impressed by the fact that you were not selfish, that you were honest, that you had integrity to be able to give this money back. Imagine if my parents were sitting here in the front row, and after my talk, they came up to me and they said, you know what, next time when you talk, don't use your hands so much because it's very distracting when you talk like this. And next time, wear a cuter shirt because this one makes you look a little bit unprofessional. And make sure, you move your hair out of your face this way. That way, people could hear you better. I don't think I'm a total failure because all they did was point out everything that I did wrong and I should have done differently next time. But if my parents are sitting here and they say, wow, I really, and they're specific with their encouragement and their praise. So for example, when you want to tell your kid that you did a good job, you don't just say, good job, you did a good job, kid. You say specifically the action or the part of their character that you enjoyed. So for example, I really enjoyed when you said to your brother that you would let him use this toy, because it shows that you're willing to give up your turn for him and that you're putting his needs first. Something. You're very specific about your praise, and it puts them up. Think about every utterance, everything that's come out of your mouth to your child just in the last 24 hours. Just for 1 second, take a mental note of it. Every single thing you've said to your kid in the last 24 hours. What is it? Is it all directions about life? Go to bed, brush your teeth, take out your homework. Is it criticism mixed in? Is it, Is it shoulds, like you should have? Was there anything positive in there? Was there anything showing interest in what that kid is doing in their life, what they're interested in? Or was it like, Pokemon cards again, like, put that stuff away and come sit at the dinner table? Going back to connect before you redirect. Let's say you want to get them to the dinner table. This is what I do with my son because he just never wants to follow what I say, right? So instead, let's say he's playing with Legos. I go to him, I sit down, it's like, wow, what are you building? Oh, it's a really nice castle. Okay, I'm connecting with him. Okay, ooh, you have a little horse. Does this horse want to come eat dinner? Because it's time for dinner. Okay, let's walk the horsey over. I didn't force him to come eat. I drew him in. I connected, and then I redirected him for dinner. Okay? This is just a little experiment that we tried. My husband and I tried with our son, and it works. And it's exactly the same with teenagers. Okay? I'm going to come in front and show you. Okay. If you're like this to a toddler, if you go like this, come here, honey. First thing they do is they run away. 95% of toddlers are going to run the opposite direction because it's like, fun game, I'm not going to go to mommy. But if you do this, 95% of the time they will come to you. You go like this. Come to mommy. They will come to you. And we tried it. We read about that strategy, and we tried it with our son, and it absolutely worked every time. Why? Because you're not forcing it. It's now become a game. And teenagers are the same way. You put a chokehold on them and you are on top of them in a negative way, they're going to run the opposite direction. If you open up your arms and you're starting to step back and you're giving them some space, you're recognizing that they are their own people, they have their own opinions, they will come to you. This is what I wanted to end with. And this is a chalkboard that was in a home of one one of the homes that my husband George was going to give an estimate for, does remodeling. So he was going to give an estimate, and he saw this in their kitchen. And so he asked them if he could take a picture of their chalkboard, and he said, okay, sure, take a picture. And honestly, this is what I want to stress the most, is that it says the way we talk to our children becomes their inner voice. Everything we tell our children as they're growing up becomes the voice that they then speak to themselves in. Even better yet, the way that we should be talking to our children is through God's words, and what God believes that these children are, because they are the children of God. And you can do everything you can for your child, and maybe you even use all these techniques and they're still straying far away from you, far away from God. But you know what? What you do is you pray for your child, and the Holy Spirit will do the rest. You speak the right words into your child's life. You speak words of encouragement. You speak biblical truth into their life, and that's what's going to be the recorder that's going on in their brain. You tell your kid, you know what? You're not able to do that anyways. As they grow up, they're going to tell themselves that they're unable to do this, because that's what has been glued or molded into their brain. But you tell them, you can do it. I believe in you. God's word says you're precious. All these things. So better than even our voices going through our kids' head is God's voice and God's words and his principles and his teachings and his promises going through their head. And that's what's going to be their inner voice, and that's what's going to be how they live their lives. And even if they stray, they do come back to it. Amen. That's it. Okay, so there's a lot of really good questions, and I'm really by no means an expert, so if you guys also have experiences that you want to share, please feel free to. One of the questions is, how do you balance when you have two different age groups at home? When you have an elementary school kid and a high schooler, and the fact that maybe the younger one might feel like they want to do that, whatever the older kid is doing, or they feel left out, or they feel like someone else is getting special treatment. Especially maybe in our culture, maybe sometimes boys get different treatment than girls. It is a struggle. It is a struggle. And it says here, this person said, I try as best as I can, but it's difficult. And it is. It is difficult, especially when we're raising not just different stages, but every single child is completely different from one another. So even if you have two kids who are the same age, maybe twins, for example, or two boys, or whatever it is, you can't parent every single kid the same way. You have to parent each kid based on their individual bend, is what they call it in the Bible. Every kid has their own bend. Every kid has their own method of learning. Every kid has their own temperament, their own love language. Every kid is so different, and so you have to treat each kid accordingly. And if your kid doesn't understand that, number one, they don't have to understand. It's not really their responsibility to understand. You do what's right for each child. Number two, if they say, well, that's not fair, your answer can be as simple as, everyone is different. Would you want me to give you the same, let's say, asthma medication as your brother? Would you want me to, just because your dad is taking medication for his liver or something, a high blood pressure, should we all take it because we're all part of the same family? No, everybody has different needs. Do we all wear glasses just because? No, everyone has their own needs, and you know what? I love you for your individual needs, and I'm going to treat you accordingly. So when your 15-year-old gets to come to church on a Friday night to attend some meeting and stays a little bit later, and you have to come pick up your other kid earlier, for example, and they say, that's not fair, he's staying and hanging out with his friends afterwards. You can say, very matter of fact, without an argument, that you don't have to justify yourself as to why you're doing certain things, but you just say, I'm treating you as your own individual, and for your age, this is what's allowed. You're allowed to be here till 8. And if you feel like you don't want that privilege, you can stay home with me. You don't even need to come. But you're allowed to stay till 8. Would you like to take that choice, or would you like to take the choice of staying home? It's hard, and the answer might be more detailed than that if you have more details, I can give you more. Same with these two questions. They're very good questions, but if you have more specific examples, I can give you a more specific answer. This expresses the desire for this parent. She says, I want to be the third type of parent, authoritative parent. But a lot of times my child, 14-year-old, has pushed her to be the second type of parent. Like, no, you have to do this or else. And sometimes it does seem that way because a lot of our children, some are easier to raise than others. And let's be honest, some kids have a strong will. Some kids are more challenging. And some kids are just naturally more compliant. And so sometimes it is harder. And sometimes we do feel like our kids are pushing us to be one way because they refuse to listen. But I will tell you that you have the power. And the power comes because you do hold the keys to the car. You do hold, if you have a car in general, or money to go get a bus pass. You hold the authority to buy them clothes. You have the authority to pretty much get them whatever they need in life. And so you hold that above them, not as, I'm your ruler, I'm gonna, take this away from you, but you use it as leverage in order to try to use these strategies. So, for example, I wish this person could give me an example so I can kind of give a response to it. Does anyone want to? I'm just trying to think of an example that would be how a kid has pushed their parent to be more authoritarian. Let's say they keep coming home late, night after night. And you as a parent, you keep telling your kid, no, your curfew is 8 p.m. You have to be home by 8 p.m. And they just keep coming home later. I would say that, yes, you have you could easily fall into the pattern of just being an authoritarian parent by saying, that's it, you're not going to have the keys again, whatever. But I would encourage you to use the strategies that we talked about, like administering the consequence. They're not going to have the keys, or they're not going to be given money to stay out. They're, whatever it is, the consequence that would be natural in your home, but then following it up with a conversation. Sorry, I wish I could be more helpful than that. And this is a very good question. What happens when your kid starts to compare themselves and what they're allowed to do compared to other kids that are their age and allowed to do different things? Maybe other kids are allowed to go to sleepovers, that's one example, or play dates or something like that. Every family has to be its own unit, and you have to decide between, if you have you and your husband, or your husband and wife, you have to decide what's okay and what's for you as a family. And you communicate this to your child in love. If the child really wants to have sleepovers, you validate the good part of that by saying, I see that you really desire to have a deeper relationship with your friends by spending more time with them. Why don't you have them over to our house? Oh, Mom, but we used to live in an apartment and it's really small and we don't, have enough space. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The more you open up your home to have kids over, and you create your home as a very loving, open environment, the more you can see what your kids are doing anyway. So you don't want them to, let's say, for example, because this is the example that's given here, for example, you don't want your kids to do what the world is doing. Some things might be permissible in some homes and not in others. Some things are not right and wrong. Some things are just based on each family. So in your family unit, if you've decided this is what's okay for us and this is not what's okay for us, this is up for discussion and this is not up for discussion. The things that are up for discussion, great. You can have a communication, talk about it, and make a decision. The things that are absolutely out of discussion and it is what it is, there's a reason why you came to that conclusion, that we don't ABC, whatever it is. You communicate that to your kids, especially as they get older. Hey, the reason why we don't let you go to sleepovers is because, you know what? There's a lot of parents out there, we don't know what they're like. We're trying to preserve your safety more than anything else. But I do hear that you have a desire to connect with your friends. Why don't you have them over? Or, hey, why don't you go and stay until 11 p.m. and I'll come pick you up at that point and I'll drop you back off in the morning. Try to see what the underlying thing is. But it's hard. The Bible tells us that we're going to have that conflict. The Bible says you will be different. We are not of this world. So all of us, not just parents and children, but all of us are going to be different than the world. We can expect that, and we can expect that it's going to come with strange looks sometimes, and why don't you do that, and you're so weird. But we should be modeling that in our own lives, that, hey, I don't say the same cuss words as my coworkers do. There's a reason for that. People might look at me strangely, but that's what I do because I know that my tongue should be used for good, right? So there's a reason why we do what we do. There's a reason why God has called us to all these things that he does in the Bible. And those are the truths that we need to communicate to our kid, not just yes, no, that's the end of story. But hey, let's look at why we don't use this language. Let's look at why we don't mark our bodies. Let's look at why we do dress conservatively and we don't dress this certain way. Let's look at and open up the Bible. Never let the fact that you don't have an answer keep you from talking to your kids. Because even if you don't have a specific answer, go to someone that might and open up the Bible together. And always, your child should know that, I don't have one here. Your child should know that the Bible is your guidance in life, and that's what they should be going to as guidance. So it's not always against you. Sometimes it's just, these are the principles that God has set out for us in order to allow us to have a more fulfilling life. Are there any other questions that you want to say out loud that you haven't? Actually, it's 8:01, so I don't know if we have time. But I'll be here afterwards if you guys want to talk about anything specific. Yes, let's pray.